Hey, fellow Unwatchers. This week's exclusive Patreon-only bonus audio is a little off topic, but it's also one of the wildest stories we've heard on this show. Today's guest was in a Paul Schrader film with the one and only Lindsay Lohan, and they did not get along.
I can't help myself. So she storms off, locks herself in the fucking makeup room, won't come out for the rest of the night. And Paul Schrader, the only conversation I've had with Paul Schrader in my life is in pulling me outside to be like, Lindsay Lohan thinks that you and James are really bullying her. You just need to be a lot nicer to Lindsay Lohan. I'm like, this is fucking surreal.
For the full audio, as well as all our bonus episodes, reviews, lists, and more, support us for as little as $1 at patreon.com/unwatchables. Hello and welcome to Unwatchables, the podcast for the movies that, like love, might tear us apart. I am Marc Dottavio.
I'm Seth Troyer.
And today we are joined by writer, musician, and filmmaker Christopher Zeischegg for two films by notorious transgressive author Dennis Cooper. Cooper's queer, graphic, sex, and death-obsessed fiction is disturbing enough on its own. So far, he's ventured twice into filmmaking. First, with 2015's Like Cattle Towards Glow, a collection of shorts concerned with many of the same themes of sexual violence as his written work. Then he somewhat switched gears with 2018's Permanent Green Light, a drama about a teenager who's compelled to literally blow himself up. And here to help us literally blow it all up is Christopher Zeischegg. You may know him from his writing, his music, his YouTube channel, his time in the adult industry performing as Danny Wilde, or from his 5 books, the most recent of which is Creation on Art and Unbecoming, available now through Apocalypse Party. Thank you, Henrietta, for chiming in there.
I think my cat almost blew up.
Yeah, that was great. And did I get that right? Is this book number 5?
Yes, that's true. Number 5.
All right. And this is exciting for us, especially for Seth, who is a longtime fan who recently introduced me to you. Although you've kind of already been on this podcast because we talk about the canyons where you pop up for a minute.
We do.
Talked about it with Christopher Norris, actually. That was one of his picks, right? Am I right, Seth? Was that him?
Friend of the pod and apparently a former coworker of yours, right, Chris? At kink.com, he said.
Yeah, I mean...
Not to lay out your resume.
Sure, I've worked for kink.com quite a bit. He was, I guess, an employee there. I was a freelancer. I would pop in.
Okay.
I mean...
But yeah, I guess I didn't, he and I talked about this before. I guess we met up there. I have no recollection of that, but I'll believe him.
Chris is probably, like in the Hall of Fame of nice people who have worked with us on the podcast, like for sure. Like one of the nicest people I've run into, just like so gracious, like made art for our episode and everything. And like, it was like, wow, who is this guy? He's amazing.
No, I fucking love him. And, he's always mad when you say he's a nice person. But
yeah, I've been calling him an asshole over Gmail as much as I can.
But he's designed now 3 of my book covers. So yeah, I'm very, very into Chris Norris. And I have contributed some little writing to reissues of his books. There's actually a kind of piece in my recent collection that's more or less about him. I don't know if you got to that part, but
I might. No, I don't think so.
It's okay.
I kind of bounced around because I really wanted to get a good feel for the Luca part.
Oh, okay.
I really wanted to make sure I read those. So I don't know. That was kind of fun about it, and I doubt you intended that, but it was kind of weird to like flip around and flip through it. And it's like this and it didn't feel, because to me it doesn't feel like a traditional, like, oh, I have these short stories lying around and pin them all together. It does feel like a hall of mirrors, and they're all sort of like pointing in a very specific directions and stuff, which I was really into.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't really like short story collections traditionally, and because I find them mostly like a lazily put together, and maybe that was my initial intention with this, because it's like it was to give myself some space to get out another novel. But yeah, Luca's like the glue that holds it together. And if, I know probably most people who are going to listen to this don't know who the fuck that is, but she's this really close friend of mine who's a multidisciplinary artist who I guess influenced a lot of pieces in that book. And the reason she and I got very close is I met her on a porn set, and then my porn career kind of fell apart, and she helped me do a lot of visual material in the aftermath, much of which had to do with like a novel I wrote, and we kind of worked on a film and art book and stuff. And now it's a little hard to talk about all that shit because a lot of the other people involved fucking hate us now, or I don't know if that's true.
Oh man, yeah.
They're just like, well, I think the easiest way to put it is like the photographer, for example, she was very young when she agreed to do that. I didn't sign a contract with her because we had all these like big dreams that didn't really happen. And then, she's gone on to be like moderately successful, meaning she does production design for like Beyonce and a lot of commercials and shit. And I don't think she wants her name associated with this anymore. And so it's kind of, I think the director's in a similar boat. So whatever. The book is being reissued in November. So there's at least that.
The Magician.
Yeah, Luca. Yeah. The Magician. It's basically the only book of mine anyone really gives a fuck about. So.
Well, I give a fuck about the new one, and I really like Body to Job also. So don't you insult me.
All right, well, there's few. I just mean... No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just mean prior to The Magician, my audience knew me primarily from porn. Like, I didn't have a literary audience. And so... Body to Job, I think a lot of the feedback I got from it from people who were reaching out and emailing me from that time period who are like porn fans. It was like, why isn't this erotic? Or this isn't very sexy, or like, why did you write, like, why are parts of it not real? And, stuff like that.
That's so funny. I never thought about picking that up and being like, this is going to be Chris trying to tantalize me. Or something like in like 50 Shades of Grey Pornhub edition or something.
Right. Well, I don't know. I don't know a lot of these people. At this point in my life, whatever. I fucking hate porn so much. I can't do anything about it, but I want half of the porn fan audience in the world to be catapulted into the fucking sun if I had my way.
I think that's probably not a hot take, even from folks who were never involved in it, like myself. I think there's just generally 50% of people could probably be tossed and catapulted into the sun, I guess. So
I'm sure somebody thinks that about me too. So whatever, I guess we just have to...
I have to admit, I was familiar with you as Danny Wilde, but in a way that I didn't know that I was, and which I'm sure comes up for you, has come up with you plenty of times when you meet people, maybe. Where I was listening to Wake Island because I am a fan of Dennis Cooper, and I think I found Wake Island through Dennis Cooper, which is a great pod. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And it kept on I was like, who is this guy? Like, okay, it's that guy from like these videos that I watched like forever ago. And it's like, it's just this weird tiny little world. I don't know. It just reminds me of some of the like magic and rituals and stuff that's in your books. You know, just like these weird like, how does this like this person leads to a podcast, leads me back to like some video with Gianna Michaels that I saw in like, you know, when I was 20 years old or something.
Right. You know, the funniest,
just like driving around in a car, like the two of you like driving around in a car. I just remember that one, and like being like publicly indecent. Amazing.
Yeah, that shit was very difficult for me and frightening. I remember, I don't know why that scene's so popular. I remember I was in college. That was the shit people would bring up all the time. I mean, that's a long time ago. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 33.
Okay.
So
I'm about to be 39. You know, I saw like a lot of people don't recognize me anymore, which thank God, kind of. But I was at FedEx recently, and there was like a kid who must have been 21, something like that. Kept being like, "I know who you are."
Wow.
And eventually, I was just like, "Okay," like I admitted it, but I was like, "How the fuck old are you? Like this stuff isn't." I mean, I guess it's on Pornhub forever. But then he goes, "Well, I like the classics," which just made me feel like a fucking grandpa.
Oh man,
you know?
no, that makes me feel like a grandpa. Yeah, I don't know. But it is this funny thing to arrive at, where it is like, I mean, I'm bisexual, but at the same time, just the way porn is filmed, like men, especially like straight porn, it winds up like straight centered porn, like the woman is just like so central that the men just become these like hanging figures. They do like disappear in a weird sort of way. So it was, I don't know, it was kind of interesting and humanizing for a face to be like, I do know that face, but okay, all right, there was a person there, and they do exist, and they might not be totally gung-ho about this jackass mentality of this scene too, from what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've really like found your people now. I mean, with, you know, you were talking about Chris Norris, and we've had B.R. Yeager on before, and it seems like you did meet really cool people through there and are kind of still now doing like really interesting stuff kind of in the same field.
Yeah. I mean, I think so too. Thank you. I guess, you know, I've had a lot of negative thoughts about my experience in sex work over the past several years. But that's a good point. I think, well, I don't know. I love writing. I love the type of writers that I've now become associated with in this sort of underground literary scene or alternative literary scene, of which B.R. Yeager and Christopher Norris are a part of. Oh shit! The client fucking texting me. Wow. Can you give me 1 second?
We can take a minute.
Yeah, we're totally fine.
Hey, I can do that, but it will be. Hold on. What is my cutoff? But what is? All right. Anyway, yeah. So I think that is something cool to come out of it. I don't know. I find like the alternative literature scene similar to like underground music scenes that I was a part of as a kid, and I had no real success, quote unquote, there. Like the bands I was in, no one fucking knows about. But you know, Chris Norris has a little bit of scene cred for that, and yeah, I don't know. It's just, you know, the people who are into this shit seem to be very into this shit. Otherwise, like, how do you know about it, right?
Sure.
It's often people who are other writers or who are at least loosely interested in literature as an art form rather than kind of a, I don't know. It's not like the Netflix of literature or whatever. It's just like, I think you need to be a little bit more invested, right? Something
yeah,
like
for
that.
sure. and able to weather certain things to find the pleasure in it too. That is like definitely a part of your work and also Dennis Cooper's work, which I think is this like, I don't know, like, sub-dom relationship you can have with the work, with like intense, like whether it's metal or noise music too, is this sort of like, it hurts at first and then it feels good. And I think that's kind of interesting about your new book too, that like it begins, the first story in it, like I will say it has one of the most gruesome scenes in it I've read probably since I read like the last Dennis Cooper book I read. So kudos. But then it becomes, I don't know, the more you read about it, I get to know this Luca person that you have such affection for, and it means so much to you that you realize that this is like just a very interesting way of writing, like, I don't know, like a very affectionate letter of thanks to this person. And at least how I interpret it. I know that's also, I don't know if you thought about it, but like, I'm sure sure it crossed your mind that like that one of the big things that Dennis Cooper, who is like, I don't know, he's, to give some background about him, who is like involved in these movies we're talking about today, is sort of he's like referred to as sort of like the god of the modern wave of this, what people call transgressive fiction right now. He's like, sure. Which was like really mind blowing for me and a lot of people when you've come across him. It is like, oh, okay, like Chuck Palahniuk, he uses really gross words or something, and then you come across Dennis Cooper and you realize there's like William S. Burroughs air like walking the earth in Paris as we speak. He's like, it's like a real epiphany. But his main work is that a lot of people know of is the George Miles sequence, which is these 5 novels, and they all deal with like really heavy like child abuse and murder and torture and things. But at the heart of it, they are these like strangely sweet sentiments, and they are these tributes to his like best friend growing up, George Miles, who like met a tragic end and had a tragic life and everything. But it's all centered around for all the darkness, it's centered around this light of a simple thing like friendship or love, and then spirals out from there, like how those things are not so simple, right? But yeah, I don't know. That's a long way of saying like it did remind me of some of what was going on in your book.
Yeah, someone else made that comparison. I mean, look, Dennis was and may still be one of my biggest influences. I mean, he was like a god to me in my 20s. Now that I have some relationship to him, it's not quite as like this expansive thing, but
sure.
Yeah, I find it's not like he and I are super close, but he's been incredibly supportive. Luca actually worked on his latest film with Zach Farley. I've yet to see it, but I think I might get a sneak peek in October, maybe. We'll see.
Which is wild, yeah.
But I find the George Miles stuff especially when I've read his more recent books, that I don't know if they talk about it in a more memoir capacity. I mean, he seems to push back against that pretty heavily, but at the same time, it just seems like this incredibly sad thing to have followed him through his life that there's kind of no answer to, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the other part, right?
And Luca is not someone I love in a romantic way, more in a platonic capacity. And I also have this weird thing. I mean, I talked to her about this. It's not like we had a falling out or we're not close. We still are close, but I guess I had spent such intense amount of time around her for several years. And these days, it's like our lives are just very different. So I was like, I wrote this book that's kind of a lot about her, and then I feel like in the aftermath, I'll see her like once a month, once every other month, rather than like we're working on these intense projects together. So I feel like I have less of explicit knowledge about like what's going on in her life lately. And it's fine. I mean, she's about to go back to school, I think, for another master's degree and PhD and stuff. She's following a very like academic route. She's a sweetheart. I think she's an amazing artist. And yeah, I mean, also, I think there are a few people who would read that first story in that book and sort of take it as an honor to be to be written about in that capacity. But you know, she and I had done all this stuff around my other work that was also very explicitly sexually violent, and it, you know, it is kind of a Dennis Cooper ripoff. I hope that I find a little bit of my own voice there, but
no, you do.
That's probably all right. Well, thank you. But it's certainly the pushing off point is Cooper. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you're
and
also.
I watched some of your interview with him too. Was that the first time that you guys had a conversation like that?
Well, certainly a conversation where I interview him. He and I had met a couple of times. Maybe 3 years ago in Los Angeles. Maybe Luca made the introduction. He showed up to a reading that I was a part of with Zach. They were visiting from France, and we chatted really quick and then said, let's get lunch or something within the week. And we did. And I hung out with them for a little bit, both of them, Zach and Dennis. And I mean, Dennis is just so incredibly sweet and friendly and supportive of young artists, which I find, I don't know, it's just kind of amazing. I've met several of my heroes at this point, including like Brett Ellis, people like that, who I also have a lot of nice things to say about. But I think Dennis keeps his hands kind of on the pulse of what's going on in a way that I think most older artists of any medium don't really.
He's such a good person to point to. Yeah. Like, even for me at my age, I'm like, maybe I don't do that anymore. And then, you like look at his blog or like listen to the latest interview with him, and he's just like way ahead of like fucking 20-year-olds right now. It's like, it's so wild, and it's enviable, and it's inspiring that you can have that kind of energy if you just apply yourself to it.
It was wild seeing him as this like, mild-mannered, white-haired kind of older guy in this interview. That was the first time I'd ever seen him.
Yeah, I lent Marc Frisk. Marc had never heard of him.
Yeah, I had this entire scene I only know through basically getting to know people associated with it through this podcast. And it made so much sense going back and actually reading something by him just to see his influence on all of these writers under these independent publishers and stuff. But also I have a very like limited view of him now, because I basically spent like a couple weeks reading Frisk, watching these two movies, and boy, was it like a trial by fire of introduction to Dennis Cooper, because that is all that I know about him up to this moment. And
there's no easy way in, I don't think.
Yeah, especially coming off of Frisk, I was just like, this is not really my thing. And so we're going to get a wide perspective here, I think, between the three of us.
Sure.
But I did feel like Cattle Towards Glow, I mean, going straight from Frisk to that, it very much felt like this was part of the same world and the same voice. And like a lot of the things that he was writing about and his preoccupations were suddenly on the screen. Like, instead of everyone in the book being like, a gloomy twink, they were all gloomy twinks on screen.
You can actually look at them, and they are indeed cute.
They're very cute. I mean, yeah, I went to see that movie. I don't know how many like public screenings there were of it initially, but when I first heard that was being released into the world, there was like an underground gay porn festival happening at this little venue in Los Angeles. I think Kevin Killian had something to do with it, if I remember correctly. And then Dennis had posted about it like on Facebook, but this was like a 24-hour film festival, and I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm sitting there for 24 hours to watch gay porn to like hopefully get this feature film somewhere. So they finally got like the time slot dropped. I took well, this is sort of sad, but I've been with this woman for 8 years who's divorcing me, but at the beginning of this relationship, she was willing to go with me to this gay porn festival, which was wonderful. And we had a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, one of the things she pointed out at the beginning, because she was like, she was a commercial photographer at that time. She was like, the casting's really good. Like, they're all really cute.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't know what casting agency he used for all of his movies. That's like straight out of his imagination. But I think what people need to understand, if you're listening to this episode and don't know about anything about Dennis Cooper, like so much of his sensibility comes down to, he's talked openly about this from what I understand, is he's like has a real sexual, I don't know, hang up or fetish about violence towards these boys he's attracted to. And Frisk feels like he's very much just him depicting and exploring that. And if you're not particularly interested in that, then that could be a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And at least like the very first short in Like Cattle Towards Glow, which by the way, it's 5, like it's basically an anthology film, I guess you could say, of 5, unrelated shorts, except perhaps thematically. And the very first one is about I guess some kind of sex worker who's really good at playing dead, slowing down his metabolism. And I guess he's helping some guy realize a fantasy of being with the dead body.
Right.
Yes.
And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Here we are.
Yeah. If you read anything by him, you sort of, this is par for the course for what's going on with him, which, I don't know. One of the ways I feel like I could explain Dennis, which I've gathered from various interviews, is like, there was a point where I feel like Dennis was, and he's communicated it, that like he was worried he might become a John Wayne Gacy or like a Jeffrey Dahmer because of the thoughts that were going through his head. And he was worried, he was like scared of the thoughts and fantasies he had. And it seems like he arrived at like, oh, actually, I am kind of sweet. I am not a monster. Actually, actualizing your fantasy would be lonely and isolating and sad, and not to mention all the other things that would come with like actualizing such a dark fantasy, like going forth with murder or whatever, but he plays with the idea that like, well, what is so fascinating about the fantasy, and he's trying to isolate that and what it's like in his head rather than the reality, which, he oscillates between the two, right? Which this short aspect of the movie with the boy who can, he like puts on headphones and he just kind of disappears, and he is rather convincing. I was curious about like who this kid was. He was like really, like you were watching him, he like was barely breathing, it looked like. But it does oscillate between that sort of like, ooh, this is exciting, but also it's kind of boring because you're with like a dead body. Like, and that is sort of the push and pull of what goes on in a lot of Dennis's work, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, and he talked about this in the interview I did with him, but he sort of went back on what I had understood him to mean several years ago when we had this conversation. So I have kind of an idea in my head of what this movie was supposed to be. And I don't know if it's reality, but I think he wrote a lot of these vignettes as porn scenes, or like the introductions to porn scenes.
That's what I heard.
And he had
that tracks.
But like, because I think he admittedly is very into pornography. And I had this discussion with him as well as Chris Norris. I didn't really push back with Chris Norris about it, but I think both of them have this concept, and it's something I've heard from a lot of artists, especially who work in quote unquote transgressive media, right? that they find pornography to be incredibly interesting and has the capacity for this freedom as an art form. I sort of think that's bullshit, but that may be bullshit because of my experience in the financial realm of porn or like the sort of legal areas of porn. But I think what Dennis is onto, I can't really speak to him for him, but it's like, in his writing, it's like he's dealing with stuff it's almost like the interesting part of it is what you can't actually put into words, or especially in a filmic context. Like, I don't think if you put sex beyond what you see in like Cattle Towards Glow in a Dennis Cooper film, like you almost can't really capture what he's going after because it's this very internal feeling, right? I mean, the thing that I think resonates with a lot of young people who get into this shit is that, like, for a lot of young people who get into this kind of literature, music, like let's say metal, punk, hardcore, goth music, whatever that is, that's sort of like associated with youth subculture, you're coming into your experience as a human being where you're for the first time feeling everything. So it feels very new and very heightened. And when you're talking about things like sex, love, desire, that shit feels like it's going to kill you when you're a teenager. Like, I mean, for me, that's how I felt. And I think that's not an uncommon experience. And I think Dennis captures that type of feeling by pushing it to its absolute limit with like what that could end up with this kind of death drive attached to it, right? So I think reading about these young boys who are sort of emotionally aloof, don't really know what they want, and get basically pushed into these situations where they're drugged, raped, murdered, often fucked after the fact. I mean, it's like, it sort of blows your brain up a little bit. But it's also wrapped up with, I think, care for those characters in a way that I think things like Peter Sodos's work, or like if you're just going to read like Marquis de Sade or something like that, where it's almost like an outsider's perspective of just like, and then the boy's anus was ripped open and this happened, and it's kind of just like a checklist, with Dennis's stuff.
It's not just having your yucks.
Yeah, it's like he's very familiar with these types of people, I assume, because he was one, and now, for whatever you think about that, I mean, he is in his early 70s, but he's still speaking to young people. I mean, I don't feel myself as young anymore, but like, his filmmaking partner, Zach, is significantly younger. He's reading all of this shit by young people, at least some of it. And I don't know, maybe it is just that fascination with the youth that maybe has never gone away, that I think gives him a certain empathy for young people who will always continue to go through that shit, But back to porn. I mean, I don't know. I think that's just his perspective, and even Chris's. I mean, I don't know. Chris was involved with it, so I don't really know why he feels this way. I mean, kink.com is it's like a McDonald's factory. I mean, it has BDSM involved in it, but I don't know. I should talk to him about that at some point. I think that's horse shit. You can't do anything in porn. It's fucking boring. I mean, unless you're jerking off, right? But
I want to see this face off.
Yeah. He and I should have another conversation. I forget what my point was, but that's a whole tangent. I don't know. One of you.
Well, if we're talking about, this movie has, a lot of, explicit. I don't know if it goes far enough necessarily to be like unsimulated. There's different things. You're going to see an erect penis, or
people licking butts,
somebody jerking off or something.
Yeah.
And I guess a question with somebody like Dennis Cooper, whether you're talking about his literature or now this career in film, is how much of it is him depicting and kind of getting off on these fantasies, because everybody is everyone you see in these movies is his type, and he's very clear about what his type is and the kind of things that he's obsessed with, with doing them, to the point where I don't know if any of his other books besides Frisk are different. But I mean, the character in it is named Dennis, and is very much like, clear about, and everyone he seems to run into is either gay or willing to participate in some kind of gay act. There's never like any women. It's just this like world full of twinks.
It's Eros.
Who are suspiciously
it's a magical
tolerant of
Eros
his
world.
Yeah. And he has these terrifying, horrible fantasies. And even when people think that he actually is killing people, they seem kind of strangely like, just, oh, that's interesting. And
well, yeah, I mean,
fair enough. I mean, yeah.
And I don't want to. I don't want to bring up the name Larry Clark really in any way, a way that will, in a comparative sense, because Dennis seems like a nice guy, and his movies don't necessarily seem like he's just ogling people. But there is always that line of, right, he is the guy he is obsessed with youth and sex, and that's like seems to be the subject matter that he's constantly going to. And it's interesting to see how differently he handles that between these two movies, which I think are very different. But I feel like Like Cattle Towards Glow is just a pure, uncut kind of dive into that psyche.
Yeah,
I wonder too where Zach Farley factors into this, because I don't know anything about him, and I imagine he must have a lot to do with the visual technical side, since Dennis Cooper was not a filmmaker before this.
No,
that's my understanding of Zach. Though I feel like Zach is it might just be because of everyone who interviews them is so like Dennis Cooper, you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas I think Zach is making his mark kind of under Dennis. But from what I understand, speaking to both of them, is like Dennis writes this stuff. He primarily works with the actors, and Zach is responsible primarily for directing, like you said, the visual parts of these films. And he go to film school. He either went to film school or art school. I mean, I think this upcoming movie, what is it? I forget the name of it.
It's like a house haunt or something about a haunted house.
I don't think that's the name, but you're right. I think that's something to do with the subject matter. They're both like huge haunted house fans for whatever reason.
Why not?
But from what Luca told me, this has more like a technically sophisticated film in terms of like the movement of the camera. It's on scène. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. None of us have watched it yet, but I think that's a lot of Zach's influence.
I'd say both of these are really beautiful. Say what you want, and maybe it's not to your taste, like for all viewers, obviously, but it is like unquestionably Zach has a beautiful eye. Both of these movies, and just I don't know. There's just like this beautiful, not washed out. Like there's like such a beautiful depth of field going on and everything. There is like a classical beauty going on, which is kind of cool to see in a movie unabashedly. And there is like a playfulness with both Dennis's books and these movies, right? Where these are dealing with reality and obviously like opening a real dialogue, wanting to break real ground with certain get to certain places. But it is like, for lack of a better word, like Lynchian or something, if you're looking at it from how American movies work. It's surreal. It's not the real world, like more often than not. Like this first one with the kid who's acting like he's dead and everything, it feels like it's in more of a real world. But as it goes on, we get more and more like in a strange place, especially whenever anyone opens their mouth, right? Because it is like this sort of, these feel more like strange, almost like spirit beings or like talking points than actual human beings at certain points. Like there's one short where it's just two boys in the woods, and it feels like the one is sort of like touching the other and having sex with the other, and the other one is more passive. and what comes out of their mouth like feels very cut up and very like pieces of a poem or something, more than like obviously like what people actually talk like.
You're talking about the short that I labeled in my notes as ass eating.
Ass eating, the ass eater one. Yes,
and that pretty much describes. That's not much more to that one than that.
I'll be honest, I didn't rewatch this recently. Like I told you via email, I kind of stopped watching movies a couple of years ago, but I remember what you're talking about, at least vaguely.
That's it. You're off the pod.
Well, look, guys. I was pretty explicit. Fucking hate movies. I don't hate movies. I work in advertising.
It's fine. Yeah.
I don't want to spend the rest of my night after working 10 hours.
I'm not super anxious to watch this one again either.
I remember loving everything in it up until the last vignette. I thought that was super boring, in all honesty. But I know the one you're talking about, the ass eating.
Yes.
And to the point about Dennis's dialogue, I feel like I've even read that him talking about that. I mean, there's a problem in him. I mean, he's had a lot of problems when he, I think, wanted to make porn films. He brushed up against producers who finally realized, like, conceptually, this wouldn't go well. Like a traditional porn studio.
He keeps cutting out all the fucking,
Yeah, exactly.
They're talking so much.
But the talking, even like I think your point about this is very unnatural. It's all poetic, but it's interesting to then when I read his books, I'm not as conscious of that. But then when I guess I see it spoken aloud in these films, it's not that different. I mean, I think the films are actually way, way, way less like explicit in terms of their violence, right?
Oh yeah,
especially Permanent Green Light. So
I mean, you couldn't even film the things that happen in Frisk. I mean, there'd be no. Even if you animated it, I think you might go to prison.
Yeah, it'd have to be like a CGI movie almost.
Right. So I don't know, but that. What do we say about that dialogue?
It's also very difficult to understand what they're saying. I feel like a lot of them are not. They're definitely like French and with very thick accents. Like I had a copy. I just found it online and it did not have subtitles. There was a good percentage of the dialogue. I was like, I don't know what that guy just said in a romantic, mysterious way, but it seemed romantic and mysterious.
That's particularly a problem in the second one, which is this kind of performance art thing where a guy is coming out like he's going to be doing like a DJ set, or there's like this
it's like a noise performance. There's like a crowd of kids and they're all like, we're at a noise show. And it's hard to hear him.
He's telling some kind of a traumatic story, it sounds like, but after a certain point, I couldn't understand anything that he was saying. But the thing is, he's being what looks like perhaps like performatively sexually assaulted,
right?
Like throughout it, but without being able to totally be, hear what he was saying. And then, of course, the short just kind of ends after that. And I kind of had the same feeling about the first short too, where it just when it seemed like maybe it was getting started, like it was going to, go somewhere with this, concept of a guy who was with someone who was pretending to be a dead body. And I could see building like a whole story around that, like having this relationship between the two of them and what that would really mean and how to be different to each of them. And that, but then it just kind of went on to the next one before it really went on anywhere.
Yeah.
Even though those first two are probably my favorites just because they had like kind of an allure or a mystery or a promise to them. But I was a little disappointed when they ended.
That's fair. I mean, if you look at this in the context of porn, and if I would just step back and just listen to Dennis talk explicitly, where he says, I'm very interested in pornography. And, I have obviously all my hangups around that. But something I've noticed with working with a lot of porn directors in my life, the ones that have this, have sort of dialed in a style, I mean, they're fetishists, really. Like, they do this. There's like a very severe fetish that drives their work, and I think you can say that pretty succinctly about Dennis. But I think what's more interesting about it is it's, he has his type of boy, right? We're seeing that in these films. Very beautiful, kind of, I don't know, morose young men. But it's like, it's not specifically, I mean, you could point, he likes rimming, he likes this and that, but there's a sort of like a fetish for like the internal state of somebody rather than like, I like a big ass, or I like a cock that looks like this or something. And, I think he references, what is that film director? I don't watch this shit, but he's like
he loves Bresson. Yeah, he's always talking about Bresson, which I can kind of see and kind of don't. And yeah, it's like later period Bresson, specifically, I guess.
I see that much more in Permanent Greenlight than this one.
Yeah.
So what is the relationship? Like, to me, I thought this is just about, we're paying so much attention to kind of the stillness of people's faces to sort of assume some kind of internal state or whatever. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Or?
Yeah, I mean, Bresson is very minimalist and doesn't give you like emotion. The actors are not emoting. There's it's very austere, and I think you see that with some of the stuff here, especially the first one. There's lots of solemn silences, or just little clip dialogue that is surrounded by this atmosphere. What some people might say is boring if that's not their kind of thing. I mean, they could throw that out there.
It's such a thing. It's such a weird thing that a lot of directors I find want, like, not even like as obscure as Bresson or like Cooper or anything. It's like you always hear about all the stuff with Stanley Kubrick and The Shining, right? Or like Eyes Wide Shut. He's like does all these fucking takes in order to get them to this, like, you don't even see it that like they're doing backflips with acting. It's more like the opposite. These artists really want to get to this state of the words are kind of just floating out of their mouths or something, which is interesting. I still don't really know how I feel about it as a audience member, or why exactly. Like, almost like you want this actor, but you don't want them acting, which is like a really bizarre, like, power thing that must be going on or something. Because that's how these feel. These boys feel like they don't even know what they're saying, like, at certain points, and that's true to like Permanent Greenlight to a certain effect. There's like a certain dazed, like, ghostly affect that they're trying to get. I think that has more purpose than, at least visible purpose, than in Cattle. Like, even in the final portion of Cattle, like, which is like a drone going around and following this guy around, and this woman is just talking into the like talking to him through a flying drone.
There's one woman. Well, there's a couple women.
There's one woman.
We have one woman in the Where the Wild Things Are monster suit, and then we have the woman in the control room.
There's two women. Yeah. Wow.
Two women.
And there's the mom in Permanent Greenlight.
Yeah.
And the friend who finds
there's a couple girls
suicide vest and so forth.
Dennis is feminist as fuck.
Yeah. Well, it's okay to jump around, I guess, with the shorts, because honestly, I think that one with the drone, and it's just structured basically like a big, long buildup to a reveal of, okay, why is this person just following around this guy with a camera through a drone as he's just kind of walking around and goes into some sort of compound and lays down and gets back up. And the answer is nothing, I guess. They just kind of have a banal conversation and then the movie ends.
Yeah, she's kind of echoing more of the sentiment of the movie, and Dennis's thing of, like, again, saying it like she's been interrogated by Stanley Kubrick or whatever, to the point of, like, just words floating out of her mouth of just, like, there's just something about you that turns me on, and you're so fucked up too, and I love that also. And
he's like, shut up.
He doesn't say that.
Yeah. But I feel like Kubrick is, well, at least after reading people's experiences of working with him and then rewatching some of those films, which I have. I keep saying I hate movies, but I'm actually familiar with a lot of this. So he feels very sadistic to me, though, in a way that Dennis, despite the content of his work, is not. I feel like maybe they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, and yet maybe the way the characters come off on screen, it doesn't matter. Maybe they've gotten to the same place. So
yeah, it is an opposite thing with Dennis, because that is the thing that if anyone knows about Dennis at all, it is like this reverence and respect. Everybody just seems that he's in contact with just seems to love him.
Right.
And he's just like everybody. He must be like a very nice guy, like you know, and all that. Like he must be very great to work with. People love to work with him and stuff. Like
very much not
comparison,
Larry Clark,
yeah, or Kubrick, or whatever it is, or which is interesting.
You don't think he made them do 100 takes of the ass eating until he got just the perfect one?
It's just not right. It's just not right.
Yeah, well, you know, but like he even talks about filming these scenes or directing these scenes, and he's like crying because it's like watching his sort of internal world.
Oh, really?
Manifest itself in front of him. Yeah, and Luca even recounted that.
I love
like,
that.
It's quite sweet to see. Whereas when you hear stories of Kubrick, this is I don't think you'll get that.
I know. Well, that's what I always imagine it must feel like, right? To like have, especially an actor you respect or something, or like everybody's here and they're doing my thing, and it's like it's my imagination that they are willing to partake in, and it's like does not seem to happen with a lot of artists. Like there's no like real, I don't know, reverence for that.
Are you involved? Are either of you involved in filmmaking, even shorts or indie film, or what is?
Yeah, that's actually what I started out doing a lot, and I still do. I make like like movies. They're just weird, surreal movies and stuff. And yeah, that's how
I don't
usually
anymore, but
feel.
I have a lot in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I think go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, like in a directorial capacity, meaning like when you said, I imagine that's what it would be like. So, Seth, you just a moment ago, I was just curious, like, what is your relationship to working with actors in front of you? I'm let you go.
Well, I mean, I've done it a lot, and that is always the thing. For me, it always feels like it has to be wholly collaborative because it is so like. It's just my friends usually, right? Sure. I've never really worked with strangers. I've been like maybe come close, and that is where it has felt like I really feel a sense of gratitude and like, wow, you really want to show up for my thing, you know? And even my best friends, that is where you see like, okay, like we really do have like a rapport here, or we have, or like at best like a shared vision or something, and it does feel very emotional. And I can only imagine like on a bigger playing field of like a professional, like people are going to see this and stuff like that. That must be how that feels. Where other people, you know, like at that level, from what I read, sometimes it just feels like they are just like, you know, just fucking say the lines, you asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I know in my bio it still says I'm a filmmaker. I mean, I should probably take out all of that. Musician and filmmaker. I don't do much of either anymore. I guess I work vicariously in film, but I do motion graphics. So
might not be the end, though.
Yeah, I mean, I still have sort of aspirations for that, but I think because I work in a technical capacity, I might be pushing that towards like doing performances like an Unreal Engine or something like that. But I find making movies on set. I don't think I have the capacity, or I've never been involved in a situation where I had that kind of freedom to breathe, to sort of allow myself to be like, oh, this thing is so amazing happening in front of me, because I think everything that I've been in charge of, where I'm like a director or even like producer director or something like that. Even when I was making this short film that ended up coming out for my book, The Magician, I was essentially executive producer, and there was a director on set, but I was responsible for everything if it were to fall apart, meaning like, you know, the locations, Luca was helping me produce this, but I was on the line financially. So like that to me just makes me insane and is so stressful. So like, I'm just thinking about the fucking, like, if we go overtime, this is going to cost me this many hundreds of dollars extra, or like, I did shortly out of film school. One of the things that put a big damper on me moving forward and trying to make spec work is like fucking actress sued me because she got like fake snow in her eye. And I had to basically
Nobody talks about these things.
Yeah, I had to stop the production in the middle of it and tell everyone, well, I'm sorry, I don't have the budget anymore because it's going to go to pay the legal costs, because I didn't think about getting insurance because it's a bunch of fucking film students. Like, we're going to make this thing, and all of a sudden this girl's rushed off to the ER, and, that's not cheap.
Fuck.
So
that's like the worst case scenario too, with anything like that, where you are working with like very little money or something, or just with friends, and like, yeah, something can happen like that. That's awful.
Well, I know what you're saying, that, I mean, when you're like really in charge of something and it's of any kind of scale, it's just about like getting the shot. And so the thought of it being like an artistic experience, like in the moment of getting the shot, maybe that's more for the actors than depending what kind of, where they're coming from. But it's interesting that this movie, I mean, these are first time filmmakers, this is, as far as I understand, right? And so Dennis Cooper, this is his first time trying to like fit his voice into a visual medium, and writing for that and being part of that process is totally different from, just, sitting down writing a book. So I feel like a lot of the things that we're seeing here, maybe the Bresson influence and stuff like that, you see a lot of first time filmmakers who are trying on those kind of distinct styles and stuff. Maybe they haven't wholly made it their own yet. Like I can kind of see the influences working here. And there's the way this movie is shot is very much in a particular art house style and sensibility that feels familiar to me. And it's interesting to just see, Dennis Cooper's version of that and him kind of playing around in it. And I think it works better than others depending on what short you're on.
Yeah, for sure. And there's definitely portions where I think I think I can pinpoint where it's not just being slow cinema or drone or something. It is kind of, they're learning how to not be precious with the editing. I don't know, at certain points I feel like, because there's also that, which I have with my own work too, where like I film a whole bunch of stuff and I think like, wow, this is, because I'm looking at it and I made it, it does feel like certain portions of these, even though it's not a long movie and these aren't long shorts really, like they do feel like there are portions of them that, don't, and not even in like they're not even there to, they're not successfully working with the whole hypnotic quality of it. They do more sort of get in the way, if anything, of the hypnotic quality sometimes when we're still just looking at this guy in a sleeping bag, or like still just, whatever it is. So yeah, you can see some of that where it is just, which is just, this is the beginning of like, even his IMDb page. I think this is the beginning of Zach Farley's IMDb page. It's like wild kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I say this with great reservation because I want Dennis to live forever. But, there's a certain curiosity like of what Zach would do without him, right? Because there's obviously like this visual style that's being developed between the two of them. but it's hard for me to disconnect the entire thing from Dennis and his interests, and especially because he's written these screenplays. And a lot of this seems so formally tied into what's happening on screen.
Mm-hmm.
But, I guess a lot of this has to do with Zach's choices, because Dennis has said repeatedly in interviews, like, Zach is making these decisions for basically all of the visual portion of the film.
Yeah, it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. It would be interesting if they were both forced to make something totally alone to see what that would look like.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can see this overlap of, well, Dennis has worked with people in theater. He seems to have worked on, has his hands in like a lot of mediums. I've not seen any of the theatrical performances, but what is this? I think the theater director, Giselle Vienne.
Yeah.
I've seen like trailers for some of the stuff. It looks really intense.
Yeah, they like team up with the guy from Sun O and shit.
Oh yeah, to do with the sound design.
Sun. I'm sorry, I should have said Sun. Stephen O'Malley's gonna listen to this and he's gonna kick my ass.
Is it Stephen O'Malley who does that?
Yeah.
With Giselle Vienne?
Yes, from what I hear. But
I think there was one performance in LA a while ago. I missed it, and I don't know. I've never been to Paris, so what they do over there.
Let's go.
Like he gets up to much more. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Have you been?
No.
Oh, we should just go now.
Yeah, we'll go ask him about these movies, and then we have like a little incidental music, and the pod gets moved to knocking on Dennis's door, and he's so happy to see us.
Yeah,
I'm sure he is.
Slippers and a robe, and I don't know. I'm just picturing him just being cuddly and.
Yeah, is that your impression?
Well, there's a decapitated head under his arm, but he's still being really nice, and he has cookies for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that mean we are moving on to the next movie? Because I think.
Well, I want to make sure I do want to make sure we get to Permanent Green Light. But the only one that we haven't really mentioned so far is the one short here that I think is. I think the only reason that this has a science fiction tag on Letterboxd is because
that's kind of awesome.
It has a science fiction tag on it.
It does. I'm assuming it's because of that, and maybe who knows what's going on with the drone cam.
Spaceship might as well be a spaceship.
I will say, even though that one didn't really work for me either, it does. The way it starts out is so striking because suddenly we're in this artificial kind of looking world with this fake snow that looks more like feathers that's falling down, eerie music.
Oh, right.
Almost like it's a horror movie or something when it starts out before you even realize that they're wearing these outfits.
And also feeling
which, again,
with a
like
segue from the Giselle Vienne theatrical pieces, this does feel like it's shot on very clearly on a sound stage or something.
Yes.
With very fake snow. Not to go back to fake snow, Chris, but and they're monsters hanging out with the boy. No, it's the boy is the monster, and then there's a anarchist crew, and they're figuring out if they're going to rape him, of course, because everything's gotta go that way.
It's a boy and a girl who are living outside of society in a tent in the middle of a blizzard or something, and then it's just a matter of time then before another pale Nordic twink shows up, and they're forcing him to masturbate on the ground and considering whether they should kill or have sex with him.
And guess what? He is cute. Yeah.
And
very cute. He's got it locked in.
Yeah. So, and really, just to wrap up my thoughts,
is that your favorite one, Mark?
It is not my favorite one, really.
Okay,
it's kind of hard for me to rank these. It definitely is the most striking. It's probably, I guess, the one I would watch again the soonest.
I like that one the most because it is representative of Dennis Cooper's humor. Because there is some sort of humor there about them being anarchists, and they have to, which is his whole project, right? In a way, he has these really fucked up fantasies, but he's trying to figure out the most responsible way to partake in them or even be in proximity to them. And they have this whole like diatribe about like, well, if we raped him, we would be destroying his autonomy, blah, 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 blah. And we are anarchists. And how can we do this?
No, they're worried that they took off, they'd have to take off their suits. There, where the wild
that
things
too,
are.
Yeah.
And that would be betraying.
Vaguely remember this.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, this seems just like walking around Los Angeles. Anyway.
Yeah.
And then
I have seen that. Yeah.
And we referenced the ass eating one. I think that and the final one are tied for my least favorite.
My favorite is the Noise Show.
Yeah. PETA. Is it PETA? Who's the song? I think I figured out what the song was.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't actually like much noise music, even though I've published with Philip Best of White House. But yeah. Anyway, that's beside the point. But I think that is like the most sort of like viscerally disarming piece, and it has the most energy to it. Just I don't know. The last one I find I didn't like at all.
I think we all agree about the drone one. Yeah. Drone mommy or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I do like the one with the guy at the noise show for sure. Mainly because maybe I don't even know if I love the act itself, but I like that it feels like this is a real act that this guy is doing at a DIY show, right? Then it's just kind of bringing that in like as curation rather than, I think it's interesting alongside things that he actually scripted out, where I wonder if he actually had any, I don't know. I was curious if he actually teamed up with this kid to do this, or if this is what this kid does on a Friday night at a noise show or what, but I don't know.
I don't know either.
I've seen some wild noise shows.
Yeah.
Close to it.
You're into noise music? What is the appeal?
Well, sometimes stuff like that happens. Like people like
he's in it for the sexual assaults.
Sometimes they start putting things in their butts and stuff, and it's crazy. But I don't know. Yeah, there's certain noise I don't like, but there's certain ones where there is a pleasure, pain, sort of meditative quality to it. I don't know. Just so naughty feeling too,
Yeah. I like some noise adjacent music. Do you know Gnaw Their Tongues? We'll probably get off on a tangent here, but
Gnaw Their Tongues? No.
That sounds like something you would tell me to listen to that I wouldn't, Seth. So I'm surprised you don't know that already.
What are you into, Marc? You're talking about all of this shit is like not your thing. Where are you coming from Marc? In this whole discussion?
No, I mean all kinds of things, I mean, right now, but it's like books wise, all I know is there's all of these just like the canonical classics that I've always ignored. And it's like exciting to me now being a little bit older and going and like, I just read Pride and Prejudice for the first time. That's crazy. And then something by Cormac McCarthy. And I actually stopped reading, took a break from reading Lolita for the first time to read Frisk, which is really... I need to find something totally different next time.
That's like my favorite sentence.
Yeah.
You need to read the Bible, sir.
There you go.
Hey, I never read that whole thing. Maybe there's something good in there.
Most of the things that have those kind of, fucking Cormac McCarthy reputation, you do finally get around to it. It's real, As much as the underground stuff is also like, oh, they hid this from us. It's fucking awesome. Like that stuff that's absolutely overground is awesome. But yeah, all right. So that's what we're all into.
Cool.
But would anybody unwatch this movie? That is a thing we do on the podcast. We ask
like
if you would.
Towards Glow.
Yeah, if you could like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind this bitch.
No.
Okay, yeah.
Would you, Marc? I think Marc is the only one
I
question
would.
here. You would unwatch it?
Okay.
The entire film?
I mean,
I love that the only flat out gay one on the podcast is like he's gonna.
I know.
I
seem like the biggest prude, but there's all that's not really the reason that I wasn't crazy about that. There just really wasn't much for me there. It reminded me of Anatomy of Hell, which is a movie that both of us really, really didn't like, that we talked about.
It came to mind for me too.
It has the whole airless art film thing to it that's very affected. And
wait, is that the film with the European porn star?
Yes, actually, he was. Yeah,
Claire Denis is the filmmaker.
No, Catherine Breillat.
I can't get him. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
One of those French
right.
ladies.
You're right.
What is the fuck? He's like the biggest European porn star of all time. What the fuck is his name?
I can't remember his name.
I do not remember.
There's like a Netflix biopic about him now.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
It's actually, I read, hold on. What is it? Anatomy of Hell?
Anatomy of Hell. Yes. Yeah. It's very
actor.
There is
lots
sex and there is
transgressive
death.
Sex and violence, and they're all
Rocco Siffredi.
Yeah.
There you go.
He has a really cool name.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that a cool name?
And so I don't like to throw the word pretentious around, because we don't like. So many people use that as a pejorative for anything good. They're just like, it's not a Marvel movie, so it's pretentious. Or it's in black and white, or it's in different language, it's pretentious. So I try not to ever use that word. But sometimes there's just no other word for something where, someone is putting lipstick on their vagina and talking about the subjugation of women. And I guess I got a little bit too much of that vibe here. Although this isn't as like didactic, and it doesn't feel as hostile and angry and lecturing like
not like
Catherine
political
does.
Yeah, it's so personal. So if anything, the squeamishness possibly comes from the personal of just like, all right, I'm tired of being in this guy's head. Like I want to be back in my own head or something.
So Mark, what did you think about Permanent Greenlight?
I was kind of shocked that even though it still didn't totally work for me, the way that it's different from this, I found very surprising. That I
figured you would brace yourself, like watching this one and then going to Permanent Greenlight, which there is no blood really. There is no
nudity,
nothing.
Yeah, although it is funny that the go
boys
from
are back,
something
though.
That's
the boys are back.
Right. But it is funny that this one the last film was kind of aping Anatomy of Hell, which is just not my thing. And then this one starts out really aping specifically The Devil Probably by Robert Bresson, which is a very similar movie following around these youths who are disaffected, but one guy in particular is convinced that he wants to kill himself. And stylistically, they're kind of similar. The big difference is that the guy who wants to kill himself in the Bresson movie is like very disillusioned from the world. You could say maybe depressed. It's a little mysterious. And this guy just seems to have some kind of idealization going on, some kind of mysterious statement. Like he goes out of his way to say that he's not depressed and he's actually kind of happy. Yeah. This is just something he really wants to do.
That's the interesting part about it. Yeah. No, I kind of hated The Devil probably for it being so, again, let's throw it in there, pretentious in this sort of like, just waxing poetic about death and everything, which is interesting because that's Dennis's favorite movie and Christopher Norris's favorite movie, I guess. He told me that's one of his favorite movies. And I'm still really perplexed by that movie, but I kind of love this movie, Permanent Greenlight, for it having this real sweetness with playing with this idea that, like, no, I'm not sad. I don't want to die. And I don't want he wants to explode, but he doesn't want to explode and kill anybody. And he doesn't want it to be like really gross even. He doesn't want to like leave behind anything. And he doesn't want it to be about anything. He has this line in this movie when he's like, because the whole movie is very dialogue based. And it's very much, he's just going from basically kid to kid. It feels like an evil version of the Peanuts or something. Like they're just really depressed version of the French Peanuts to me. It's just like this kid world where there's maybe two adults and they're all just like these cute kids walking around and just talking. And he describes what he wants is like, I want to explode and disappear in a way that someone would say, whoever did this, thank you. Like it's an art project or something closer to that. But and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Chris, a little bit about Dennis's work in general, which is beyond all the content and everything. What he's really, and what I think is interesting and keeps me reading his work, is the dialectic going on about the unspeakable. There's like this thing that you try and get at, and you just can't get to it, and you can't get there. Like it's hard to even talk about whatever it is. It's this mysterious object, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I watched that movie and knowing, you know, thinking about the George Miles cycle, how much that is sort of a big thing for Dennis, this person he loved as a child who ended up shooting himself in the head. And then he's made this film, which I think he describes this young man as like a folk artist who is doing, right, it's kind of like an art project rather than suicide. But it's hard for me to not read into this as a metaphor for suicide, especially in this perplexing way that I feel like if I were Dennis Cooper and had sort of this lifelong obsession / love with someone who left my life in a certain way. I mean, this is very armchair psychologist because but Dennis completely denies this. It's not about suicide. It's not about, you know, it's more like what you're talking about, this unknowable thing. And I think in interviews, he's brought up some American jihadist who ended up joining maybe the Taliban or ISIS or something.
I think it was ISIS. I remember reading about this.
It's like a white guy who joins this and maybe ends up blowing himself up, but seemed to have no ideological attachment to the movement. At least there's no trace of that in any of his social media. There's no letters. There's no evidence that he was, you know, political or ideological extremist or had any notion either way, you know, not even like a middle of the road ideological person. So I think that's an interesting concept, and that's certainly and like you said, it's just the whole thing is just a fucking mystery. I mean, reading any of these books, I mean, the fact that you don't ever have emotional access really to any of these people, but can identify with them, at least I feel that way, I think is fascinating. And that's kind of this strange pull to the work, right? And then it's just like wrapped in this extreme nature that I think the films have less of, though.
You know,
I mean, we see, yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, I just like what you're saying with the armchair psychologist, honestly. Like, because sometimes it is interesting to insert some of that with someone like Dennis. And I think it exposes actually, again, like yet again, this sweetness sort of, or this want for optimism, where he doesn't want to see the suicide of his friend as being this sad, just lonely thing that, you know, we all can probably on the outside be like, imply that that's probably what it was. He creates a story like this, which has a person who has such complex reasons for doing what they're going to do that are actually very like affirming. He actually like inspires his friends almost around him, this character in this movie. They all, by the end, like many of them, like begrudgingly and sort of like almost like disciples at a certain point, are like, no, like maybe this is going to be what he says it is. It's going to be like this complicated, really lovely thing. Of course, you know, like when you, again, this push and pull of fantasy versus reality, when you actualize the fantasy of doing the extreme thing, it probably is what you think it's going to be. It probably is going to be just like a blood splatter that's kind of sad, and your mom's going to be really bummed, and it's just going to, yeah, like, but it's this want for something more transcendent or sublime, right? Which is interesting about this movie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I place that meaning on it, I find that profoundly sad, and so I really want to believe Dennis, and maybe I should. I mean, this sort of thought process goes down a road to, like, I don't know, sort of take away, I guess, I don't know, the intention of the work or whatever, but yeah, that's a heavy thing to sort of grapple with. But I can't help but, as I guess from the perspective that, like, you put anything out into the world as an artist, the audience is going to manipulate that to mean whatever it means to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whatever Dennis's intention, it's hard for me to look at his life's work, see that movie, and not sort of attach the exact meaning that you just sort of extrapolated on. I don't know.
That makes sense. I was just surprised that the tone was, if not light, like lighter compared to the other movie and most of his work. I mean, there was nothing that made me laugh, in any of in my sampling, or certainly in Frisk. And there's a little bit of room for humor in this, and I like the movie more as it goes on and it starts to open up and become more about the friend group, and leave a little bit. And so just even little moments, I do remember laughing when he was like trying to get them to go to watch from a safe distance. Like, I want you to see me as close as you can, but not get hurt. He's like, how about that? And
like when he's preparing to blow himself up, right?
Yeah. Right. And he's like, well, this is good. I can see your hair, but not your hairs. And I'm like, okay, that's like just a funny little detail line that, like, for some reason that stuck with me. And
we'll continue.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just gonna. I know. I'm not going to suggest that you read a bunch more Dennis Cooper, because I feel like if it's not your thing, like, why punish yourself? But I will make the case that a lot of his work actually does have a pretty funny through line. Maybe not Frisk as much, but, like, he wrote a short story collection called Ugly Man that I think is sort of, he's talked about this being a lot of that stuff that's more obviously funny. It's still all the same themes. It's young boys, rape, old men taking advantage of it. But it's like there's a more obvious humor to it. And I think there's even, what is the fuck? I posted the name of this short story on Instagram before I actually interviewed him. Let me see if I can find it in the next 15 seconds. If not, I'll give up on this. But never mind. It's something like, oh shit, never mind. Like 3 boys who thought, like, experimental fiction was for pussies or something.
Oh,
like
yeah.
It's like, just little quips like that I think are fucking funny.
And there's a real absurdism because he realized how far he's pushing things and how, like,
right.
I don't know. But I appreciate his humor here. It's hard to, again, it's about things that are hard to talk about, right? And it's hard to actually pin down and put into words what he's doing with humor, because it's not just like gallows humor. I would not just say it's like, haha, better stand back, I'm about to blow myself up as a teenager or something. It is like this, it's because it keeps going with the logic. It becomes funny, and then it's not funny, and then it's funny again, with this whole sort of, I don't know, it reminds me of a sort of like babble I'd hear, like someone on acid going on, or something that I've tried to do while on acid, like explain this thing really heavily, and it's just becomes so tangled up and absurd. But there is like this really intense logic going on, and this real earnestness to it that is always very, again, like a strange optimism throughout the whole movie that is about a kid wanting to blow himself up. Yeah, for optimistic reasons, because obviously trying to defeat this contradiction is this kind of like cool thing to try and do in a way.
Well, and it's all done in a very stylized way, so you're able to kind of conceive of it as this not being an ultra realistic thing.
It almost feels like Wes Anderson style wise.
Well, I was going to say, if anything, I'm feeling like
I never would have expected with him at all.
Very unexpected from him. But to me, it does feel like a new kind of set of influences they're playing around, where there are a lot of elements of this that are very much like a quirky indie Sundance movie, which which is kind of, it's interesting to see him do that. Although it's funny that he keeps every single thing he dabbles in is something I don't like, whether it's Anatomy of a Hell or The Devil Probably, or quirky indie Sundance movie where, you have the kid who collects piñatas, but he doesn't want to ever destroy them.
Yes, he has a friend that collects piñatas.
Bombs. And, it's all very cute. And,
again, Mark, I'm so curious as to what you actually like. We talked about your Pride and Prejudice, Lolita.
You do like Wes Anderson, though.
I do. I love a lot of Wes Anderson.
I thought you were shitting on Wes Anderson.
No. I'm talking about like the descendants of those films that are unremarkable and clog up the film festivals every year. And I really do love like all kinds of movies and music and literature. It's just sometimes I don't know. I feel like a lot of it gets kind of a pass. Or like there is a difference between Wes Anderson doing it and somebody else doing it, or
sure, because it's kind of already pastiche, and then like if you keep moving that down the line, it just becomes embarrassing. My favorite movie, I'm just going to say this out loud, the past several years. It's not my favorite movie ever, but I liked Trolls World Tour. I feel like if you want to have me back, I would love to talk about that.
Sick.
Boy, I missed that one.
That shit was incredible. Just like an acid trip.
Ooh, we should do that and Trolls 2. We'll have you back and
that's the sequel. So Trolls. The first Trolls is fine. Trolls World Tour is like on another level.
Right. It's like The Godfather. It's like The Empire Strikes Back of troll movies.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
It's just like you can't, in terms of complete fucking like overload of your senses, I've not seen anything quite like that.
I'll tell you what.
It's for children. All right.
You West Coast boys can't be trusted. Your troll movies.
Yeah. Did Dennis Cooper have anything to do with Trolls World Tour?
God, I wish.
He didn't do a script polish or anything?
I bet he did somehow. Uncredited.
Well, he talks about if he's on a plane or if he's at any other, like in a situation where, he's not in his home or something, he's only going to watch these blockbuster films. I feel the same way. I can't, because at home, I'm just trying to get out of my skin by the end of the day. I just want to watch some bullshit that costs $300 million.
Some trolls.
Sure. There's something to be said for that.
And maybe once in a lifetime, watch Permanent Greenlight. I
want someone to give Dennis Cooper $300 million to make a movie and just see what he does with it. That I would
CGI boy mutilation for miles.
We might have to pull that shit off. But I think seeing that, I think that would not be that interesting.
No, I didn't terribly enjoy reading about it either.
Well, that's my thing. Like oftentimes on the podcast, I'm the squeamish one. But
you are.
I've read a lot of like really intense literature. It just is a very different thing for me. I think visually, it's just a whole other game. Which I think in the case of Dennis, it is it's being presented through experimental styling and in a way that is absurd, still disturbing quite often, but like presented through all these lenses and stuff where, I don't know, a movie that is designed to make you really feel like you're there. I don't want to be there as far as like showing me a Frisk movie, I'm definitely not.
By the way,
there is a Frisk movie.
There is a Frisk movie. I couldn't fucking believe it.
So fucking bad. Have you watched it?
Okay.
No, we might do it on the pod. Who knows?
It's like a very, very, very low budget, like queer film from the late 90s, I'm going to say. And
God bless him.
No, I mean, there's no real attempt to go there, and it's like formally like a fucking disaster. I don't know. I like to have like, I'm a little bit of, I don't know. I like an elevated. I like when you're talking about films, I want to see some money on the screen, or at least like an attention to aesthetics. I think a lot of like people in indie film historically, especially when you start to go below like the commercially viable indie film, it's like this concept's cool, and then it's just, I don't know, it's just fucking garbage. I mean, that's an example.
So, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I genuinely like enjoy the craft of filmmaking, and writing. Obviously you can read a lot of amateur stuff too, where it's like this, there is a craft to like putting sentences together and prose just the same way that there is, in movies, which you don't even need a huge budget for necessarily. It's just some people pay more attention to that stuff, or some people value that more or less than others. And sometimes that, can get in the way for me. Back, the last thing I want to say about this movie is my favorite scene is when he tells his gay friend who is kind of obsessed with him that he's going to kill himself. And, his long delayed reaction is basically, okay, so you're going to do that anyways, right? So could we have sex before you do it?
It's so good.
And the guy's just like, no, I really thank you for wanting to, but I don't think so. And then another long pause, and then I'll pay you. Like he's not letting it go. But it is, I don't know, there's something relatable and funny and sad about that.
See, that scene's really interesting. It's really long, and it's a really long reiteration of his plan and his logic and everything. And it's one take, and they're just sitting in a car. And at first I thought it was just boring for just needed cut out, but it does what's going on there. And oftentimes you do have to kind of sit with it and understand the logic that's going on, which the logic there is that this is his way of breaking up with his, this guy that he knows is really into him and letting him down. And he's like, I gotta do it. I gotta explain to what's his face, who's really into me, that I gotta explode myself for non-depressive reasons. And
I won't even have sex with you once before I do it.
And conceptually, this is why this movie really works for me. And I think is an interesting, maybe not a counter argument to what you're saying, Chris, because I am also fuck yes, give me all the giant dinosaurs and stuff on screen that I can buy. But it is surprising when you see there's no real money being spent on the screen, but you are riveted in the logic that's going on, that you're following. Because each one of these scenes, it feels like you're really having to follow this maze of what does he mean by this? And what are they there is something really interesting about following the little trail that he has for this movie that I got really sucked into.
I did too, and it's kind of the opposite kind of a film that I'm interested in these days. I don't know what to add other than I agree with you. It does feel literary in the sense that I think what drives it more than anything else is the ideas, the dialogue, the necessity for stillness and just sort of patience with the work. Mm-hmm. Even though it's not really boring. I mean, I don't feel like there was any point when I was like, oh God, I wish this scene would end, or can we just get on to the next shit? I mean, I sort of feel enthralled. And part of that also, I think, is in the choice of the actors. I think, we can just say, oh, Dennis likes beautiful twinks or whatever. But I also think there is something to be said for the aesthetics of casting attractive people in a film, especially when we're focusing on their faces like that for so long. I mean, it is.
No, something real. That's real for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean,
I'd much rather watch hot people. I mean,
That'd be
come on.
And it feels earned in
I see regular people all day long.
I know, yeah. No, for me, it does feel earned, this one, in that it makes good on his, like, promise that he is trying to go into teen themes or youth themes with at its center a good heart of caring and empathy, that he's making like his version that's still going to be too weird for like teen consumption more than likely, but it does feel like he's really trying his best to make like a John Green, like like an adaptation of a John Green book, or like some kind of, like Marc said, like a cute indie movie about teens like having a good time or something. It's just the best he can do, and it does feel. I mean, he keeps out any of the real transgressive, real tough stuff. Maybe there is the scene, of course, where the kid hangs himself and they stare at him for a while. There is that, but he just can't help himself. But I don't know. I did walk away with
it's still pretty tame.
Yeah, he's trying.
That's fair, yeah.
And it's not even about sex, which is just like it's the first thing I've come across.
Not really at all. There's no
like
real
he's
mention
pushing
of
himself.
Marc, not that you should, because like this is the equivalent of like my mother being like, you should read this bullshit that I'm like, I'm not ever gonna. But there's a book that Dennis Cooper wrote called God Jr., and it is my second favorite of his novels. No, none of that shit at all. It is crushing emotionally, and it is very small. I think you could read it in like an afternoon.
I have it. Yeah, you can borrow it sometime.
It's about a father-son relationship, and it's not about sex or anything like that. It's quite, in my opinion, one of the like more touching things he's written.
No, yeah, I love that you really like that one too, because that one really hit me, and it was maybe the one where I could finally see what he was doing, right? Because it's not in this encased in all these other distractions, like all the violence and all the sex, and I'm dealing with those. Like you can actually see what he's doing as a stylist, because those things aren't happening. And yeah, it still gets to like a really intense and I think poignant place. That book's awesome.
I agree.
All right, bring it over, Seth.
I should have given you that instead of Frisk, but I just felt like then
you would have given me the whole wrong idea.
It would kind of give you that's the thing. Yeah, it's kind of a trick. Yeah, so
it would be like, well, we wouldn't be having many of the conversations we're having tonight. So I'm glad you read Frisk is like a good entry point, but then it's sort of like, well, do you want to keep reading this shit? It sounds like you don't. So that's
that's fine.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, though. I mean, after seeing the progression of these two movies, I'm very curious about what their next movie is going to be like.
Me too.
So I probably will end up checking it out.
Cool. Well, I don't know when it's going to be out, but hopefully soon, right?
Yeah.
Ask Luca. Yeah, I'm excited. That's so wild that you knew Luca wound up being the producer on it.
Agreed. It's fucking small world. You guys know Chris Norris. Luca's fucking producing Dennis Cooper movies. I don't know. I think it's like, there are so many fucking people in this world, but I think when you dial down, especially into very niche interests, like you end up meeting a lot of the same fucking people. Jaeger, etc.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time, and because we've gone really long here. I hope that we didn't keep you too much, but that was really fun, and that conversation went to all kinds of interesting places that I never could have predicted.
No,
concluding with that amazing story.
Yeah.
So.
Really good. Well, it has been a pleasure. You too. Just let me know when it's out, and I'll do my part to share. But yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to encourage everybody to check out Creation on Art and Unbecoming, which is out through Apocalypse Party, but you can get it on Amazon and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to give money to the man.
You got to give Bezos his cut. Come on.
Yeah, we're really worried about him right now. Money.
Yeah.
He's suffering. Again, then The Magician is coming out through Apocalypse Party in November. So
I'm gonna snag that.
Listening to it around that time, check it out.
All right, awesome. Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah.
No, the rest of my life's pretty fucking not interesting for a thing like this. I'm working on some Netflix reality shows for my day job. Real exciting.
Cool.
All right. Is Lindsay Lohan on any of them?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
She texted me. She says she's still mad. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're homies with Lindsay Lohan. So
yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I'll put in a good word. And I know you. I loved this. Like, I'm still working through the book, and I really like it a lot. And I've heard you talk about it being like a bit of a transitional exercise, like of it. Again, sort of what we've talked about a lot in this discussion is this like going through darkness and also, but wanting to talk about something, God forbid, nice sometimes too. I was curious if you are leaning, like, maybe you don't know what your next project is, but like, yeah, does it feel like something different is coming kind of for you?
Well, I had wrapped up a draft of a novel before I kind of put together that collection. And I don't know that novel is significantly different than anything I've done before. I guess it is only in the sense that it's not autofiction. It's not explicitly about me. But I am actually writing right now a sequel to that because I kind of want to drop both of those books within a year of each other. Oh. I don't know who's publishing yet. I don't think it would come out prior to 2026, no matter what. But yeah, I mean, we'll see thematically kind of where this goes. But I think in terms of my life and everything, at the point of that I said very explicitly at the end of that book, Creation, is, I just wrote all these books in a row about just like being a sex worker, how I don't know that I was always thinking this explicitly, but certainly in recent years, I've come to kind of recognize that had some pretty profoundly negative impacts on my psyche. And I don't want to just keep like beating myself over the head with like a story about that and wanting to die and so forth. I think I'd like to grow old and kind of find something wonderful in life, and that has to do with my relationships to other people and whatever. And not all of that is like explicitly tied to my art, but I think adding Luca, that real world element of my friendship, to that book was significant in that way, to be like, we went through these processes together, and a lot of my writing is like hitting this one note trick all the time, but this is someone profoundly important to me, and I just want to kind of shine a light on her.
Okay. I wish you well in finding that next step and everything. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's end on a heartwarming note.
Okay.
I like that.
All right, good.
We never do that here. Unwatchables is produced by Tony Scarpitti, hosted by me, Marc Dottavio, and Seth Troyer, with artwork by Micah Kraus. You can find Seth and I on Letterboxd under Marc Dottavio and Sloth Troyer. You can also check us out at unwatchableспod.com for links to our Twitter and Instagram, or support us on Patreon for bonus content and to have a say in what we watch. Thanks for listening.